Today, we want to talk about planning. And I have to say, I owe a lot to my dad, who taught me at a very early age to set goals, to make plans, to work every day, to work that plan. He's also teaching me still today. You know, my dad turns 87 here in a couple of months, and he's still planning. I mean, he's got adventures that he wants to do, and he's planning for them. So, you know, he sets a good example for me. So I think today's a good talk for young and old alike. But I have to tell you something. I spent a lot of my life also planning. For those of you who don't know, my first career, what I spent 28 years doing before God called me into the pastorate, was to help people plan their finances. And so I did a lot of planning. I know a lot about planning. I know it's really important for you to have a goal and to be really crystal clear about the goal that you want to achieve, that you can write it down, that you can state it, that there is a time limit on it, that you can tell people, you can describe it, you can visualize it. I know it's really important that you have objectives that kind of are stair steps to get to what your ultimate goal is, and that you have plans for every single one of those objectives. And then as you go, you regularly evaluate my progress. Where am I at versus where I thought I would be? And then adjust the plan, okay? I mean, that's what I spent my life doing. And I'll tell you something. Well, I know that this sounds a lot like a talk that you would get anywhere out there in the world. You might say, what does any of this have to do with the Bible? What I just described to you, I can tell you from long experience, absolutely works. It does. They're just some basic principles of living that if you can state it and you can visualize it and you can objectify it and you can work it and you adjust it and you're focused on it, it's going to happen for you. I've seen it happen for many people. But now here is the question that I want to come to you with today. See, I've seen so many people who have set their goals and they've made their plans and they've worked their plans and they've got to their goals, and at the end of the time they said, okay, that wasn't as much fun as I thought it'd be. You know what I mean? Sometimes we can achieve a goal that we thought was a big deal, and we get there and we find out that it wasn't as big a deal as we thought. Or we find out that we maybe hit that goal, but we missed a whole lot of other things along the way. Or maybe I got my business goal, but I lost my life along the way. Maybe I lost my family along the way. Maybe I don't have a relationship with God like I thought that I would have. You see what I'm saying? So what I want to talk to you about today is, let's take all of that I just said to you as a given, but let's layer on top of that, because this is kind of how my life has gone. All these things that I knew, but then I would see people who were very wealthy or see coworkers who achieved a lot and their life felt empty. And I would say to myself, my goodness, there's got to be something else. There's got to be something more. And God, you must be calling me to something else. And that's what drew me into the pastorate, to go that extra mile, to fill in what is missing. And so when we come to this idea of planning for my future, I think what we find is that God has plans for us too. God designed you and me. God knows you and me. God has a future for you and me. We're going to find out all this to be true today. And if I make my plans and I don't include God in that, at the end of the day, I may achieve my plans, but so what? I've missed out on what my life should have been so much about. And if you find yourself today saying, I've hit some goals in my life, but I feel a little bit empty inside, even though I got to the goals that I thought. I hit those football goals that I wanted, or I hit those athletic goals that I wanted, or I lost that weight that I wanted, or I hit that financial goal that I wanted, or whatever it might be, and you still feel, wow, it's just not enough. It's because it's not enough. It's not what God has in mind for you. God has so much more in mind for all of us. So let's talk about this. What does the Bible say? And I've made this as simple as I know how to make it. The ABCs of planning God's way. All right? So let's start with the A. The A is I want to anchor my planning in God's past blessings. I want to anchor my planning in God's past blessings. This is really the starting block to planning God's way. To understand that He's been there with you and me, that He's helped you and me in the past, and He's going to continue to do that now and into the future. Let's start off with an Old Testament. A lot of this today comes from the Old Testament. 1 Chronicles 16:8. Give thanks to the Lord and proclaim His greatness. Let the whole world know what He has done. So what is this key to this first step of anchoring my planning in God's past blessings? What's that? The key to this first step? It's purposeful thanksgiving. It's every single day saying, boy, what do I have to be thankful for today? It happens in our worship. We just experienced that. We're going to experience it again before we're done today. It happens in our daily quiet time, and I'm so encouraged to see so many of you taking your quiet time so seriously in 2018. But then we see it's beyond that we go about, according to this 1 Chronicles 16:8 passage, that we go about talking about it, that there is a continuous reminder in our conversations. You see, this is not automatic. Now, for some of us, we can talk about it more easily than others, but it's not an automatic thing. We have to be purposeful. This is the main lesson from all of those early Old Testament stories. Some of you are reading through the Bible again in 2018, and so you're starting to go through some of those Old Testament stories. And what do we learn about the Israelites over and over again? That they forgot. God did marvelous things for them, but they forgot. And when they forgot, they got into trouble. So again, coming back to 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verses 11 and 12. Search for the Lord and His strength. Are you searching? Search for the Lord and His strength. Always seek His presence. Remember the miracles He performed, the amazing things He did, and the judgments He pronounced. You see that? There's a search going on. There's an active looking in our life. There's this always seeking His presence. And when we do that, we invite God into this planning process, into this goal-setting process. We do it with His strength. We do it with His participation. And when we miss out on doing that, what happens? We limit our view. We limit our goals. When we remember that we're not working in our own strength, but we're working in God's strength, and that God is our partner, and that God has done amazing, marvelous, miraculous things in our past, then we start to think in terms of miracles and amazing. We don't look just at what we might be able to do. We look beyond that. And we start planning with a why not kind of attitude. Not whether we can accomplish it or not, but things that we can't possibly accomplish, things that we don't think are doable. We begin to say with God, why not? Because God has worked in my past, and He will surely work both with me and for me in my future. Let's take a look at another Old Testament passage. Boy, you're getting a lot of Old Testament today. Lamentations. When's the last time I preached from Lamentations? Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22, 23, and 24 goes this way. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. Did you know that? The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, okay, here's the key words. You might want to underline this. Therefore, with all that being said, I will wait for Him. The secret to planning with God as your partner, as well as your inspiration, is patience. I will wait for Him. Now, it doesn't mean that you never act. It does mean that you begin to think in terms of acting with God in His love, and in His power, in His strength. So much so that you wouldn't think of making a move. You wouldn't think of taking a step. You wouldn't think in terms of planning without Him. And so that's why I'm calling this very first step, the ABCs, I'm calling it anchored. Because you need to anchor your plans in God's love and in God's plans for you. See, we don't plan in a vacuum. I know some of you, because I talked to you this morning, some of you are going through some really tough times right now. You're in the midst of difficulties. You're in the midst of trials. And sometimes say, planning? You want to talk to me about planning? I'm not sure what's happening tomorrow, let alone planning for my long-term future, right? But when we go to God every morning and we recognize His love and His mercy and the newness of His relationship with me in my life, when we read that, His mercies are new every morning, when we believe that, then we plan for better days in our future. And we don't wait for it just to happen. We're active, but we're active with God. Because God does have plans. God does have plans for me. He does have plans for you. He has plans for even a better future than what you believe possible. And so that brings us to our B. Our A is anchor. Our B is believe now in God's plans for me, so I plan with confidence. The anchor, the A, has a past tense to it. I anchor what I'm doing, knowing what God has done for me in the past. But now I am believing now, in this present moment, in God's plans for me so that I can plan with confidence. Again, another Old Testament passage. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans, what? To prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. See, this kind of confidence that we can have is rock solid. It's always dependable. We don't always follow through with our plans, right? Some of us who have made resolutions this year, it's already end of January, we're not following through. We don't always follow through with our plans, and so we can fail. Our failures tend to reinforce themselves so that we tend to just to give up on ever planning for a better future. And some of you know this. We have a word for it. It's called, not planning. We call it survival mode. I'm not planning for a better future. I'm just trying to survive the day. I'm just trying to get through the day. But our life with God is never just survivor mode. Because even when we don't believe in our future, even when we can't see beyond the day, we need to know that God sees into our future and that God is planning a better future for us, that He has His own plans for us, and that they are good plans, plans to prosper, plans to give us hope. And so when we are thinking in terms of planning, we need to tap into those plans. That's why planning God's way involves trusting in God, not us. That's where this believe comes in, planning, believing, trusting in God, not in us. Again, we turn to Proverbs 3, 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Wow. What a great promise to us when we're thinking about our future. Do you see there where it says, in all of your ways? All right, let's take a look at it again. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him. Do you see that? If God means all when He says all, in all your ways, then all your ways would include your planning ways as well, right? So submit all of your planning to God because He knows things that you and I don't know. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows the events that are about to come up in our life that we don't know. He understands things that we don't understand. So why would we ever lean on our own understanding when it's possible that God could be our partner and we could lean upon God for his understanding? That's why he says here, come to me. Trust me. Do you see this last part? He will make your path straight. You see that? I love that. What does that mean? He will make your path straight. It means that there is more to planning than the first day of planning, right? When we set a goal that first day and then we plan for it, but then there's a second day, and the second day things are different than what we thought they would be, and so we have to adjust our course, and so we reevaluate and we plan for it. We replan based on this updated information. Now, the great thing about planning with God is that he helps us with this ongoing, daily, corrected, re-planning mode. And to be honest with you, as English speakers, we really kind of struggle just to understand exactly what this means. He will make your path straight. One of the things that I have taught you, and one of the things that I think is so amazing about the Bible app, why I encourage you all to have it, is that you literally have at your fingertips every English translation of the scriptures that you could have. You say, well, why is that important? Well, because the original language of the Bible was primarily Hebrew in the Old Testament, almost entirely Greek in the New Testament, a little bit of Arabic as well. And so when we're reading in our English translation, we are literally translating those languages into English. Okay, does that make sense to you? And there are some phrases, there are some Hebrew and Greek concepts and writings that just don't translate as easily for us. And so we come to this Proverbs that he will make your path straight. And this is one of those places where if you just look at all the English translations and you just kind of let them settle in your mind for a while, God begins to his spirit just begins to fill you with all the things, all the promises, all the things that he wants to do in your life. So let's take a look at some of these different translations. The Common English Bible, he will keep your path straight, your ways straight. Or the Complete Jewish Bible, he will level your paths. Take out the ups and the downs, the hills. Or the Christian Standard Bible from Holcomb's, he will guide you on the right paths. Or the Good New Translation, he will show you the right way. So there's multiple ways. Which way is the right way? Or the God's Word Translation, he will make your paths smooth. Or the King James Version that many of us are very familiar with, he shall direct thy paths. Or the Message Translation, he is the one who will keep you on track. Or the New Living Translation, he will show you which path to take. Do you see how marvelous this is? How God wants to speak to you through all of these different English translations. So daily planning, daily adjusting, daily counting on God for his wisdom, for his guidance, for his smoothing out the road ahead of us. The only thing that doesn't work, you ready for it? The only thing that doesn't work is not planning and not seeking God's help in your planning. If you don't do that, then it's not going to work. We have a word for that. That word is called foolish. Foolish. A wise man, according to the Proverbs, a wise man thinks ahead. A fool doesn't, and even brags about it. See, the wise man is a planner with God, but a planner with God as full partner, as full motivator, and if there's ever any doubt about it, planning with God as the one who's actually in the driver's seat of my life. Then I kind of move over and I say, God, you drive. Where you go, that's where I want to go. What you have in mind for me, that's what I want to have in mind. Your purpose for me is my purpose for me. And if that's true, then I can fully commit to these plans for a brighter, more hopeful future. Isn't this great? See, God says, yeah, planning is great. Goal setting is great. You do it. I've created you in such a way that when you visualize this and you have this goal and you plan for it, it's going to work for you. But is it worth going for? If I, A, anchor my planning and what God has already done for me, and I then, B, believe that, what God has done for me in the past, He's going to continue to do, so I can plan with confidence and my plans align with His plans for me, then I can come to see, which is so important, commit to my future plans, knowing God loves me and wants me to succeed. Now, how do you know if we're really committed to this? The answer is simple. We work the plan. Once we have done this and we know that we're submitted to God, we know that, God, you're in the driver's seat. My purpose is your purpose. What you've got in mind for me, that's what I want. I'm submitting everything. My daily adjustment, I'm submitting to you. Then we can have confidence and we can work the plan. Too many of us, I'm afraid, just plan the plan, but we never do anything about it. Planning the plan doesn't work. Working the plan is what works. Boy, that sound had a ring to it, didn't it? Right? God will make our path straight. He may smooth out that road ahead for us, but it's still up to us to take those steps. Right? We still have to walk. We walk with God on our side, but we still take the steps. We still walk. That's called faith. Proverbs 27:23. Be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds. Now, obviously, the Proverbs writer is writing to a shepherd kind of audience. Most of us, the last I knew, aren't tending to flocks. But we have our business, we have our jobs, we have what God has called us to, and we always need to be diligent to know the state of whatever the business is that God has placed us in charge of, right? But coming back to the idea of shepherds, what kind of shepherd says, well, these really are God's sheep. God created them. He'll take good care of them. I'm just going to sit here. No. There's active work involved, knowing the state of my flock and attending to their needs. And the same is true of all of your endeavors and all of my endeavors. They all require planning. They all require goal setting, but they also require working. And so every day when we sit down with God, say, God, have I been obedient in what you have called me to do? Am I taking the steps that you have asked me to take? See, sometimes, in fact, I'll tell you the truth, almost every time, there are steps involved that are not comfortable for you and for me. Sometimes to get to where God has called us to be, calls us to do something that we just, in our own, would not be willing to do. But with God at our side, in the confidence that He provides us, we can believe in Him. We can take those steps. When we follow this ABC, anchor in God, believe in God's plans, and then C, commit to those plans with daily hard work to bring it about, then I can and you can actually pray this blessing, and it's okay. Look at Psalms 20, verse 4. This can be a prayer that you can actually pray. When you've done this ABC, when you've anchored in God, when you've believed in God's plans for you, when you're committing to those plans with daily hard work to bring it about, then this prayer is okay for you. Psalm 20, verse 4. May He give you the desire of your heart and make all your plans succeed. You say, Lord, would you give me the desire of my heart and make all of my plans succeed? I know some people who teach a health, wealth kind of gospel will take a verse like this and twist it to say it's all about what I want. But you see, if you have done what I've told you, and you've anchored it in God, you have sought God, you've looked for His purpose in your life, and you say, I am wanting to line up my goals and my planning with your goals and your planning for me, then God desires for you to be successful. Because this is what He has called. This is what He has created you for, what He's created me for. This isn't self-serving in any way because we followed the ABCs. I'm anchored in God's plans. I have confidence in God's plans. This is another way of saying that I believe that God wants the best for me. He defines that best for me, and that's what I want for me too. That way I know the true desire of my heart is the same desire that God has for me. That all of my future God-oriented desires would also be God-blessed. And that becomes the basis for our daily worship. Not just the kind of worship that we do here on Sunday morning, which is good, by the way. Love it. We're going to get right back to it here in a moment. But that in all I do, in whatever I do, and the only verse that we have from the New Testament today, Colossians chapter 3, verse 17, whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. See, this is what I've told you about this morning, and why I asked you at the beginning to be aware that you can watch this over again, that you can listen to it over again. See, this, what I told you about today, this is a lifelong daily practice. Seeking God. Seeking God's will for me. Knowing his purpose for me. Knowing that that purpose actually will give me my greatest joy. And wanting that purpose with all of my heart and making plans to bring it about. Having confidence in those plans, knowing that they are also God's plans for me. And then working those plans every single day. And then making adjustments every day along the way. And then giving thanks every single day for what God has done, for what God is doing, and for what God will bring about. Doesn't that sound great to you? It sounds great to me. I really wish when I was a young man, and I was, I so appreciate my dad. I appreciate all of his wisdom, and I appreciate the things he taught me about goal setting and about working plans and accomplishing things in life. But when I was a young man, I would sit just about where this young man here is sitting, and I would listen to the preacher preach. You're so much better than I was. You really are. Because I'd be sitting there, and I'd listen to the preacher preach, and in my head, rebelliously, I was thinking about the plans that I had and the things that I wanted to accomplish. And that most of what I was hearing was just a waste of my time. That was a horrible attitude on my part. What I want you to hear today is that all the stuff that you have heard about planning and goal setting is probably mostly right and mostly futile. That's why the richest man who ever lived, Solomon, wrote, meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. Right? He had everything. Hundreds of wives, hundreds of concubines, the richest man who ever lived, more possessions than anyone before or since, and he gets to the end of his life and he writes, meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. I don't want your life and your goal setting and your plans, when you get to the end of the road, I don't want you to say meaningless. I want you to say, oh God, what a great ride it's been. What great plans you had for me. What great purpose you had for me. And I have spent my life as much as I could following those plans. That's what I want. Is that what you want? That's planning God's way.